Everyone. My name is Amanda Wallis. I'm doing my PhD in psychology at the moment at Victoria University of Wellington. And about 3 months ago, I returned back from a year-long placement at the Natural Hazards Center with the University of Colorado in Boulder. So tonight I wanted to share with you a little bit about my research in a 3-minute thesis kind of format and the role that my Fulbright-EQC Graduate Award played in that. So to put it simply, I study the psychology of disaster preparedness and what it is that makes people prepare. Believe me, I know this isn't the most fun conversation topic, and I'm sorry in advance because people don't love thinking and talking about disasters. It fills us with a sense of dread, nervousness, feelings of guilt that we haven't done enough, or frustration that we don't have the adequate resources or support that we need to prepare. It's these thoughts and feelings that interest me because they can predict or restrict our likelihood of preparing. I'm really interested in how we can use this understanding and this knowledge to actually increase preparation on a wider scale. In a book titled The Ostrich Paradox, the authors Robert Meyer and Howard Kuhnreuther talk about some of the many cognitive biases that stand in the way from people preparing. There's a long list of these, but a couple of them include our focus on the short term rather than the long term, or our dependence on social norms to guide our behavior. Another example is the optimism bias, which is what happens when we mistakenly tell ourselves that bad things happen to other people, but are much less likely to happen to us. An example of this is seen in a study by Meyer and colleagues, and they looked at the lead up to Hurricane Sandy. They found that New Jersey residents consistently estimated that there was a 70 to 80% chance that their area would experience hurricane force winds. And yet, when asked to estimate the likelihood that their house would experience damage, their estimates were much, much lower. So we can acknowledge that our risk is high, but we often excuse ourselves as the exception to this and fail to prepare accordingly. A good way to sum this up is with the idea of the G.I. Joe fallacy, which is what I've got on the screen behind me here. It was coined by Laurie Santos and Tamar Genler at Yale, and it's based on the 1980s kids' TV cartoon series. I never watched it because I'm a 90s kid myself, but apparently at the end of every episode, there'd be a lesson, and G.I. Joe would address the children watching by saying, "Now you know, and knowing is half the battle," implying that the other half of the battle is just to get out there and do it. But in a lot of realms and in disaster preparedness, this just isn't quite true. We can know our earthquake risk, our hurricane risk. We can know all of the things we need to be doing to prepare. We can even know all of the cognitive biases that are standing in the way from us preparing. And yet this information just isn't always sufficient to generate behavior change. So this is a dilemma or a fallacy that's forced a lot of disaster scientists and researchers to come up with creative and innovative ways of working in and around our cognitive biases to increase preparation. Some of the ways that this is being done is through widespread behavioral campaigns, tailored disaster communication strategies, interventions, and policy changes, all based and centered on evidence and research. Specifically, my PhD thesis is looking at the role of our emotional attachment to our houses as a possible tool to increase preparation by reminding people what they might lose. I first read the book, The Ostrich Paradox, that I referred to earlier when I started my PhD, and it played a really formative role in deciding my research direction and my research interests. So it was a pretty full circle, surreal moment for me to hear one of the authors speak in real life, in the flesh, about a year later at one of the leading international disaster conferences in Colorado. And that's just an example of one door that my Fulbright Award opened to me that may have otherwise remained shut. I think for me, the biggest takeaway personally and professionally was about the importance of breaking down barriers, both culturally in terms of stereotypes and professionally in terms of the academic hierarchy, if you will. Before I went over there, I was really intimidated by a lot of the people that I'd be working with and figured that I'd be pretty down low on the pecking order, but I ended up having casual dinners with these esteemed professors that I was so intimidated by to start with. It taught me that mutual respect and mutual understanding, more than hierarchy, is what really fosters collaboration and learning. More than that, I also mixed and mingled with Fulbrighters from 50 plus countries and really tried to embed myself in the American community and culture. As you might understand and expect, this kind of challenged a lot of the preconceived ideas I had before going over there. And it made me reevaluate what it means to be a human and what our borders mean at the end of the day. Ultimately, I think I realized that country borders and professional ranking mean very little when it comes to basic human connection. So I am planning to finish up my PhD next year, fingers crossed, and continuing work in the field of behaviour change and human well-being. But for now, I'd like to extend my thanks and gratitude to Fulbright New Zealand and the Earthquake Commission as well for providing me with this fantastic opportunity. And thank you all so much for coming out tonight. Thanks.